What are we
Yeah,
doing?
so I'll just like drop some topics. You guys can just give your positions on these topics. So,
The only thing
abortion, what's the guys' position on this?
I don't care to have an opinion on abortion.
What about
Okay.
veganism?
I don't have an opinion on. I don't do abortion or
What
applied
about
ethics.
theism?
Theism, agnostic.
Okay, so, wow, do you have the same position, agnostic?
We
I know.
coincide on that. I'm agnostic.
Listen,
too.
I'm really curious about what his his normative ethical view is, or maybe like something along those lines. I think would be interesting.
Normative
But
ethical view, huh?
yeah, I would like to do some normative ethics with him. But I
Okay,
was
so what do you
talking
mean by
with
normative ethics? Just to clarify for the VC.
yeah. So that's just going to be an applied moral worldview of how we consider actions ought and ought not be done.
Okay, so what's your position on normative ethics? Wow, and time respectively.
Yeah, act utilitarianism I'll hold to for this conversation.
Okay, for
I'd say
this
rule
conversation.
util. Yeah, I'd say
Wow,
rule
do
util.
you? Okay, cool. So you guys can just debate on this: rule utilitarianism versus anti-utilitarianism. Do you guys agree on this debate topic? Are you guys comfortable on debating on this topic?
Sure, but I mean, how long do you want this convo to go for? You're
As long as it can
uh,
get. If you have to leave, then we can just continue the debate at another time. That's fine.
okay. That's fair then.
Yeah. So
All right,
let me just
so
get this rolling.
yeah, that's
Alrighty.
fine.
Yeah, wait, hold
You're
on. To clarify, when we say
oh,
normative ethics,
Lordy.
are we baking
Yep.
in? Does he have me muted
Mm-hmm.
now? Yo, Tom, do you have
No,
me
I
I
muted?
don't
don't have
know,
you
but
muted,
Okay.
buddy.
yeah. Well, continue.
Okay. To clarify, when we talk about normative ethics, do we include, right, how we would apply this in a real life scenario, or are we saying this is like ideally in the best world we use this system, right?
What's
Ideally,
your
in the
response,
best
Simon?
world. Yeah, I'm gonna need some clarification upon that.
Yeah, so
Like
let's say
in terms
like
of what we, because hold on, before I want you to give the clarification. I don't
okay.
know whether or not you're serious on this, because when we established, or more specifically when I established, what I thought normative ethical views were. I don't know if you were paying attention or not, but it was how we ought or ought not do things within the world. More specifically, obviously, if you're talking about normative ethical views, it would be the objective on and offs of actions. So I'll give you, just a little bit of, a question here, or sorry, clarification on the question,
Okay.
and that's really all I want.
So yeah, when I say like in an ideal world, I mean like, are we talking independent of how we may be able to carry out, right, or not carry out any given system by which we determine things to be right or wrong? So for example, I would say in my system, well, ideally we don't even follow anything. We just like by default do what is good, like determinism and like good determinism, whatever the fuck. I don't know if there's like a actual formal name for this. But the other sense is like we're talking about a theory, right, which we can best apply given our condition. So let's say within real utilitarianism, I think it serves best for the majority of cases, which is what we care about ideally. Yes, we would probably want every single case to be accounted for. However, we know for a fact that we can. We have recorded, for example, we have recorded cases in which legally we sentence people to death, or we were about to sentence people to death and have them killed. However, we come to find out that, well, actually the evidence that was used to actually convict them was really weak. They shouldn't have been convicted at all, etc., right? But realistically, we can't really do anything to get around that, right? It's there's always going to be a chance that we are convicting somebody wrongfully, right? That we see things not as they are, right? So that's the main distinction that I'm making here. Is it going to be ideal or just realistic?
So when we talk about these two, I guess it's pretty interesting. I guess we could do either one that you would choose. I don't really care.
Yeah, realistic.
Realistic, okay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. So you could just give me, I don't know if you want to do like a 5 minute opening to, your view, or I mean, you already gave me an example of the view, so I don't really care. But if you want, I can give you a 5 minute opening of my view, or maybe a little bit less than that, since I have to go soon. More
Yeah,
specifically,
I'll just
I have
like
to leave. Like I have
yeah,
to leave.
I'll just like summarize and repeat a little bit what I said. So I think rule util is best suited, right, to be the moral system by which we go by, right, as humans, because it accounts for what we care about, right, which is accounting for most of the cases as opposed to every single case. So yeah, that's that.
I got kicked from the VC. I don't know who did that, but
Okay.
just can you go ahead?
Yeah, I was saying like I think rule util is better because it allows us to account for a majority, right, and get principles by which we can determine more likely than not that somebody is this thing. However, we sadly still have to account, right, that there are going to be some sections we can't, which we can't really do that, okay, which we can't really like deal with. So
I
if you
mean,
have
I'm
a
not.
rhetorical,
Yeah, I mean, hold on, just to clarify here, I think
okay,
act utilitarianism actually suffices everything you just listed there, but in more specific, I asked what, for a 5 minute opening or less of what the view actually was or what you thought it was, but you just explained to me why it's better. I'll just explain to you act utilitarianism, and then I'll explain to you how it meets the
okay.
conditions.
Alright,
But I'll ask you.
so just to cut through the whole like beating around the bush type shit. So you disagree with the claim that rule utilitarianism accounts for a majority of cases better than act utilitarianism, correct? Time.
I think act util I think it goes through those conditions and does them better.
Okay,
I
cool.
think
So
that's
we're just
equal.
gonna.
Yeah, that's what I was just saying. So yeah, act utilitarianism. Essentially, the way it works is it's the actions are made are based upon the maximization of utility and or um, pleasure. So when we would say utility or pleasure, there's a couple of things there. Um, I'll give you a basic example: trolley problem, right? So let's say there's 5 person on one side. If persons, I can't speak. And there's person I can't speak. Holy shit. There's 5 people on one side. There's 1 person on the other side. There's this train track split into two, whatever, right? There's a trolley heading towards the 5, right? And so there's a lever there that you can pull in order to actually save the 5 and unalive the 1, right? And so as an act utilitarian, um, for the utility there, you'd be saving utility and you'd be maximizing utility because we would say 5 is greater than 1. And so that would be the maximization of utility, and so that's how the ought is considered made there. And so if you would here, could you just repeat the 3 things that you said account for why your view is better than mine? I just want to make sure I have these clear.
Yeah, so the problem here is that inherently, in a realistic context, right, we're going to be unable, let's say that legally, we're going to be unable to do this thing because we literally are. It takes a lot of time to produce new judges. It takes a lot of time to produce, what's it called, like the procedures itself, like for example, getting the courtrooms, for example, getting the actual, like, the peers to actually judge you by, like the jails, etc., etc. We can't look at every single example, right, individually and break it down to an incredibly ridiculous amount of detail and say, well, actually, did this maximize X being utility or moral goodness, whatever the fuck you want to cash out as, right? However, right, we want to actually be efficient with these things. Therefore, we say, well, in most of the cases, it's just wrong to like shoot somebody for no actual reason, irregardless of whether it pleases 50 million other people, right? Which could be the case. And if we were to abide by act utilitarianism, we actually would have to account for that and see, like, well, what did this do? What is the complete calculus here, right? Instead, right, with rule utilitarianism, which is like, well, actually, the rule here is that if you shoot somebody for no fucking reason, right, or seemingly no reason, you should go to jail. You should get this amount of time, right? You should get this fucking prison, right? This, like, let's say, like, security level prison, right? And then we can just come to a swift conclusion, which allows us to actually move to more cases, right, and get more convictions, right, and actually produce, right, like we have right now in the U.S., Canada, any other country, right, a overall better society free of criminals. Okay.
Oh yeah. So that's actually pretty interesting, but I guess
Okay.
that doesn't half answer what I asked for, but whatever. Um, I have like a minute and a half here, so I'll just state this like last statement, and then if you want to give a statement, then we can continue later. That's whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. So in terms of act utilitarianism, and the example that you gave, if you were to shoot someone for no reason, well, it doesn't clearly state
Seemingly.
whether, yeah, seemingly no reason. Then well, we wouldn't know at all, seemingly, whether there's any utility or pleasure being maximized. If you were to go further into the explanation, which is what most for all utilitarians do, is they would go in and say, well, actually, when they seemingly unalive this person for no reason, went through all those court cases, maybe it set X amount of things correct, or it set X amount of other things free. As like a basic example to add on to your analogy, right? Even though it's not initially in there. And so we would say, well, yeah, you seemingly shot him for no reason, so there's not any actual utility being maximized, but in the overall spectacle of things, you're maximizing a ton of utility. And so when you talk about things like real util, right, I would just tell you, well, as an active utilitarian, the action for what you're making seems to really not fall very moral or hold to higher moral standards or a more objective moral standard. And so the way that I would say I would give you as a piece of advice is that if you were to hold to active utilitarianism, even if you account for an extra amount of variables, it doesn't matter because the maximization of utility is still going to determine the ought and ought not. Let's say, and you already guaranteed as an example here, like, oh yeah, but there's X amount of court dates and judges, etc. Right? Well, all of these things would be considered in account to pleasure and utility too, and so it would be the considering maximization of that. So, if you were to tell me, well, yeah, people don't want to do all of this, and so it wouldn't be a maximization of pleasure. Well, what are we actually accounting the pleasure for? Which pleasure is valued more? Which one's higher? And so that goes into a deeper bit of a thought process there. I'll respond a little bit more later. If someone could just send me the recording so I can give more of a fine-tooth combing over what he was saying earlier, because it was kind of distracting me with the multiple examples there. I'm not gonna lie.
Okay.
But
To give one quick little response is like, do you think that we realistically, right, given the actual, let's say, like assets that we have right now, right, within the legal system, actually assess individually every single case, right, to the most incredibly ridiculous step that active utilitarianism entails, right, as opposed to just following the rules, right? So, for example, let's say the conviction times, right, they would have to be specially tailored to whatever offense you are committing, right? And then we would have to look at, well, is this actually maximizing the utility here? Is this like maximizing pleasure? Like, how many people were displeased by this, and how many people were actually pleased by these? Do you think that we can actually ever hope to achieve this?
Yeah, I think we do.
Okay, if so, how?
Yeah, so let's have like a funny little thing here. So let's say after the actual action is done, and let's say people arrive or something. You do a poll and you see what everyone's pleasurable amount of X amount of things that have to be done. They write these things down, and then they all abide by them, and then they do a poll of consensus. So you do the poll of consensus. Whatever the most amount wins is how they're going to do things, and you're still maximizing pleasure and utility.
Is that it? Okay. So you're saying that just by adding a little, so just by adding a little poll, right, whenever somebody shoots somebody dead in the head, right, and saying like, let's say for the witness as well, did this actually increase your utility? Did this actually not increase your utility? Are you feeling good? Are you feeling bad? Did you get trauma? Did you get like pleasure off of this, right? Do you think that this is the measure that we could use to actually achieve real utilitarianism or active utilitarianism, right? As opposed to just going by standard convictions, right? As opposed to just going by standard means of evidence, right? Instead of just adding a random fucking poll.
Yeah, no, I think if I were holding to active utilitarianism, that would be the correct way to go about it. Because if you were to just follow by legislative means, let's say, for example, I'll just give you a basic one. I really am overstaying my time because I was supposed to leave earlier. I'll just give another funny statement here. Well, not really funny. It's pretty serious. But let's say abortion bans in some states. Well, if you're abided by those laws, right, and you can't have an abortion, that abortion would have ended up saving your life, right? Well, would you have acted on that because it goes against the law, but it saves your life and causes you the most pleasure? Well, that's what an active utilitarian would say, or the utility of that. But you could also make the argument that it's not. And so when you say, well, is this thing better than abiding by the laws? Well, yes, because some laws, because they can just be completely deficient in terms of actual maximization of pleasure and utility, which is why we ought do the poll method that I suggested earlier.
Okay, so
Melissa, I
yeah,
have
and
to.
I'll need.
I really
Okay,
have to head out here. I'm sorry, bro.
okay,
But
cool. Just
if
for
you want to
the
give, oh yeah,
go ahead.
yeah. I have to leave, but if you just want to give a statement after like after I leave, and then just someone sends me the recording, and I'll look
Okay,
through that.
yeah,
I do
just
want
for
to
the.
be a reminder. I don't hold to act Yuto. I'm just doing this for fun, and because you're kind of shit. But
I mean, you're
you
fucking
know,
garbage yourself, but it's kind of ironic. Regardless, the point being
well,
here,
thanks, bro.
I need. Okay, anyway, I need like at least one
Have a nice
example of
day.
like laws that just incredibly disregard utility, right? So I don't think that you can provide that. Second off, no, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's an entailment of real utilitarianism, right? To like not let the person have an abortion. There seemingly would be a actual principle there that by which we can determine that, well, if the mother's life, let's say for example, is in danger, we would actually prioritize that, right, to maximize
And
the
what's the
actual
debate?
pleasure, right? And then for the rest, like the poll thing, I don't know why the fuck you would ever suggest that without any kind of backing or without any kind of reasoning as to how that actually would be feasible at all. Like the question in of itself was the feasibility of any of these measures, right? As opposed to like the mainstream view of having certain sets of rules, having legislation that is already predetermined, right? And by which we just judge these things without going into incredible detail about every specific action, every specific case, etc., right? So like it's just you arguing against the mainstream view in literally every fucking country ever. So yeah, we can stop the recording there.